I just think we're at this spot right now. When you think about it just as a point in time, it seems a little bit disjointed, fragmented, confusing, and frustrating.
Welcome to the Insurance Refocused podcast, where we're highlighting real agent stories and how they are innovating to respond to the changes and challenges happening in the independent insurance industry. My name's Lindsay, and I can't wait to introduce you to my amazing co-host, who just so happens to be my mom, Carey Wallace. Mom, how you doing today?
Oh, Lindsay, it is going really well. I just came off a pretty hefty travel schedule, and I'm back home. I'm in my own office for the first time, and I'm going to be here for a little bit. So I'm having a great morning. How about you, Lindsay? How are things going?
I'm doing good. It's been a busy week, so I'm feeling excited and ready to rest over the weekend, but otherwise feeling great.
Well, this is your first full week of no grad school, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes, and I've quickly replaced it. This won't be a surprise to you, but maybe to people who've only known me for a couple years. I started volunteering at an equine therapy barn. It's focused on veterans with PTSD. And oh my God, I think my boyfriend thinks that I've been abducted, because other than work, I've literally been at the barn, and he's like, who are you? And what did you do with my girlfriend? So it's been a fun week for sure.
That is no surprise to people who've known you for forever. And I love that you found something you're passionate about. Well, I have the distinct honor and pleasure of welcoming one of my dearest friends in this industry. I think he's the only other person I've spent more time on the air with than you, Lindsay. We are very, very fortunate to have Mr. Chris Cline joining us on the podcast today. Welcome, Chris.
Hey, Carey, and with Lindsay, thank you for having me. Yeah, you're right. I was thinking back about that when we connected on this thing, the number of shows we did in my prior life, and the different types of conversations we had. Book clubs to data to, the whole nine yards. So it's really cool to be on this side of the microphone with you guys.
It is. It's actually an honor. I'm a little nervous, to be quite honest with you. I feel like I'm interviewing one of the biggest icons of the podcast world. I learned a lot from you, though. I paid attention, I swear. So, anyway.
Well, those are incredibly humbling and probably not well deserved, but I appreciate the kind words. I really do.
So you and I did something pretty cool around the same time, Chris. We both kind of took a step in a different direction. We're still in the industry, but for completely different reasons. We both have changed the perspective we have on the industry from one role to another. And for me, that's been a pretty cool transition. And, honestly, we talked to each other as those things were happening because we're obviously friends. But as I watch the industry, I think perspective is everything. And I'm just interested to know, for me, I was able to be introduced to people I didn't even know played a role in this industry. I was very, very siloed because I was part of the association world. I was actually pretty well connected inside the association world. I had limited knowledge about carriers that were super important in our state. Some national things. I had some, and some vendors, and InsurTech and all of that. I felt like I had dabbled in a little different areas. When I stepped out on my own, I was able to meet people in groups that I really didn't even know existed. So I'd love to hear from your perspective. What has that been like for you as you moved from Westfield to ACT?
Incredibly enlightening and exciting. And I mean, if we're going to just be incredibly candid, I'll just say maybe a little bit frustrating, or maybe I'll put more of a positive spin on that and say opportunity identifying. How's that? And like you, Carey, I mean, I worked for a regional carrier, super regional carrier that has had a phenomenal reputation in the industry, and was very fortunate to have the opportunity to travel the way I did and get involved in the industry I did. And of course, the support to launch the podcast that we did at that carrier. And so I guess kind of like you, I thought I was pretty well connected and knew a lot of people in the industry, and do. But when I made this move to the national level with the big I leading ACT, it opened up an entirely different, I was going to say a new swim lane, but multiple swim lanes of insight as to what was going on in the world. And it was actually comparable to the epiphany I had going back almost about a decade when I changed roles at the carrier and got involved in the distribution space and inherited, in some regard, um, the company's relationships with like state trade associations in collaboration with some peers and folks and some of the firms that support the industry, via M&A valuations and consulting and those types of things. And admittedly, when I first moved into that role, I questioned whether or not the expense made sense and what was really happening there. A lot of money gets spent by a lot of different companies, in theory, to support really great work. But I didn't necessarily see the value in that. And so it took a while to get involved. And that's obviously how I got to meet you and folks that do what you do at states all around the country. And it took a minute to get involved to figure out that there is an entirely different parallel universe and maybe multiple universes, to get sciencey and maybe to lead the end, that's going on out there that nobody else knows about. And so the epiphany in that was that through that point in time and now is that there's a lot of people, a lot of groups, I believe, with noble intent, trying to do good things for the industry and trying to rally around stuff. And so I don't know whether it's always been this way or whether we're just in a really unique spot, but it seems like everywhere you turn, you're interacting with or seeing another new group or think tank or something coming together and attacking some of the same problems. And I hear it a lot, right? It's very, very frustrating. And whether you're an agent trying to figure out where to plug in, whether you're a company that wants to support one of these organizations, write a check, get involved, allocate time, it's hard. So the reality is, though, we're talking about it because we see it. And I've had this conversation very recently. And then I had this conversation at InsurTech Connect last year. And the question was, so at ITC, right, there's 8,000 people, massive event, one of the largest gatherings of any group of insurance professionals every year. What percentage of the industry even knows that the event was occurring? And so you think about all the underwriters, all the actuaries, all the claims adjusters, all the CSRs and account execs every single day busting their tail to do the thing. The only reason we're here, really. And they don't even know that there's these other universes of people out there, but yet we're saying there's too many other universes. So what's that really look like? So I don't know. I'll stop on that. I don't know if I even addressed your question because it's fascinating.
Hey guys, if you're looking to improve your bottom line, allow your team to operate efficiently, and really improve that customer retention, I believe you should check out Ascend. Ascend is the all-in-one insurance payment solution. They are focused on streamlining your invoicing, premium financing, accounting, and they'll even make your carrier payables for you. They are taking agency bill and making it as easy as direct bill. That is a game changer. They integrate with all of the major AMS players, and here's the best part. It's free. There is no subscription, no cost to you. They allow your customers to pay how they want. If you are interested in improving your efficiency, go visit ascend.com/insurance refocused and let them know that we sent you. It is. There's so many pockets trying to do the exact same thing. And you said it, it's almost like it's a bit watered down. I actually think our industry in some ways works against each other because, listen, agents only have so much time and capacity to think about these things. They've got to run their businesses. And at the end of the day, we want the independent insurance agency channel to be strong, to compete, to grow, and to be prosperous. That's really what we all want. If you're a carrier, if you're a network, if you're an agent, if you're an association, we all share the exact same thing. And if you're a vendor, you absolutely want to do that. But as we fragment and we think about the number of events or the number of I don't even know, that are competing for time and money, that if we could collectively put that together, what a powerful situation that would be. And I think, I've watched you travel the country and speak on certain things. Sometimes we're crisscrossing the skies or, texting early in the morning because we know we're going to be in the same place. But it does beg the question, what's the vision of, let's take technology. How can we help agents be much more fruitful and compete, be prosperous, and leverage technology? Where do you go for that information? And is it one place? And if it isn't, how do we make it a consolidated place? And that's just one example, right?
Yeah, and there's two things. I can get pretty angsty and get lump in my throat, or the proverbial discomfort in my belly, thinking about how do you bring it all together. And I mean, honestly, I think you know me. I think at least as much as I'm capable, I try to think deeply about stuff,
Right.
and I go back and forth between: is the problem statement solvable? Is it worth solving? And depending on your answers to those, then what's the best course for an agent? And so there's a lot of regional, a lot of geographic diversity in need and approach. A very, very like a large city agency versus one that's trying to be national in their scope versus one that just wants to solve personal and Main Street commercial lines issues for 3 or 4 counties. All of those have very different needs. And so this comes back to the overly cliche and overly used term that the blessing and the curse of our industry is independence. And so again, these new groups or collections of people or masterminds or traders, whatever they are, all sort of have the same thing. Now, it'd be really utopian to say, wouldn't it be great if everybody stopped before they formed something new and said, what else is out there? What are they working on? What are the gaps in what they're working on? And how can we come together to do it? And maybe that sort of happens over time, right? I mean, you typically in any massive change in an economic scenario, you think of the dot-com boom, you think of what actually is happening in insurtech. There's a big boom, and then it sort of right sizes based on need, based on cause, based on ability to execute, based on value back. So maybe that stuff will happen, right? So I work at ACT, been around nearly 20 some odd years. The trade associations have been around many times for 100 plus years.
Right.
And that is a blessing and a curse, right? There's stability in that. There's some momentum and there's some energy. But if you're brand new to the industry, or you've got a completely different perspective on what your focused part of the industry should be doing, you might not look at something that's been around 20 years or 100 years and feel like it can play a role. And so let's go do our own thing. And maybe that'll work, and maybe that'll serve a different part of the world. Maybe it won't, and these things will normalize. And so we could talk about this through the lens of technology, but we all know some people that are phenomenal insurance professionals that have a point of view that this industry is way behind and nobody's investing correctly, and we should just be doing things very differently than we are. But I can talk about this, but I have a very fundamental question I ask, and I've done this 7 times over the last 4 months in front of a room full of agents. And I've basically asked this question to get to this point. If your top 5 carriers came into your office on Monday morning and said, good news, we're going to open up our APIs and let you guys have at it. And we're even going to post all the specs and stuff on our portal. How many people have heard that rant? Third of the room will raise their hands. And I said, now safe space. How many agents in the room would have the slightest idea what to do next?
And no one raises their hand, correct?
I'm in about 1,000 agents estimating that I've asked that question in front of them, and not one have raised their hand.
I get it. I totally get it.
So social media in of itself is another place where people are getting competing points of views. And so just because A, B, or C agency is doing X, Y, or Z doesn't mean that it's right for your agency. And so I just think we're at this spot right now. When you think about it just as a point in time, it seems a little bit disjointed, fragmented, confusing, and frustrating. What I try to think about is also point in time. It's very real, but what's the trajectory we're on? And are we on a positive trajectory or a negative trajectory here? And we could debate that. But I'm going to say this and I'll stop. The newbies, the new folks into the industry. I don't mean that as a negative term. Newer entrants into the space, younger folks, especially the tech firms, they hate it when I say this. But these are material data points that we can agree or disagree on, right? Use the universe study, use the market share study, and use all the stuff that you talk about every single day. We have more agencies than we've had in years. In fact, we were supposed to be going backwards, and we added 4,000 new agencies in the last 2 years. Some people want to chalk that up to a large exclusive carrier going independent. We all know that's emotion. That'd been baked into the denominator, and there weren't that many left anyways.
Exactly.
Market share has gone up in personal lines and commercial lines.
Yep.
Up. All through a global pandemic and untold billions of dollars of external capital that kind of said we all are going out of business.
Right.
Then you look at it and say agencies are worth more than they've ever been. And one by one, this could be different, but by and large, agency margins are as high as they've ever been.
Amen to all of that.
So this isn't a reason to put your head in the sand, but it ain't as broke as people want to say it is. So customers are choosing an independent agency system as it is.
Yeah. The question is, will they continue? Right?
Well, I don't know,
the question.
Right? And so, I was on a panel at an event recently, and the question was, how do we create an Amazonian experience for our customers, right? It's a very common question. And so I challenged the other panelists and the folks in the room, and I said, so how many people have heard this or said this? We're the independent agency channel. What we bring is trusted advice and consultation, and we custom tailor product needs individually to our customers, to find the best way to protect their assets at a fair and competitive price. All right. How many people have a doctor? How many people have an attorney? How many of you have bought any of those things on Amazon? So we want to say we're a professional service, but yet we rally around trying to sell our products like a blender.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Now we can learn from all of that,
right.
But let's not self-perpetuate the things we're actually fighting against.
If you're like me and many other small businesses across the country where hiring, training, and retaining employees is a challenge, Agency VA has a solution for you. Agency VA has over 1,000 VAs hired, managed, and trained in the Philippines, Latin America, and India. But did you also know they have 100 licensed agents here in the U.S. that can help you manage your book? I use a VA who lives in the Philippines, and I absolutely love her. The process was simple. We had a consultation where they asked me my needs, goals, and concerns, and matched me with Allie, who has been an absolute game changer for me. Employing Allie through Agency VA has allowed me to focus on my business without worrying about HR concerns, turnover, and monitoring payroll. The best part is the Agency VA team was eager to help my company and also make sure that Allie is getting employee benefits, a competitive salary to help her live a better life in the Philippines. If this is something that you are struggling with inside your agency, please visit agencyva.com/insurance refocused and set up a time to talk to them about your hiring needs.
I think that lends itself to the increase in InsurTech. Like, this wouldn't have even been a thought process that would have been had if we didn't have the boom in InsurTech, really indie tech, that's helping make these things possible, right? Like, no one would have ever thought that insurance could be sold like a blender before, I think, right? Am I right in thinking that?
Yeah, right. And so, and that's another example of we are evolving. I mean, it wasn't that long ago where if an agent got a phone call from a client about a claim, they had to handwrite an accord loss form and fax it to a carrier. Then it had to go into I mean, now we have direct reporting of claims. I mean, we're getting better. And I mean, this isn't to say that there's not plenty of room for the industry to grow and evolve and do things differently. But again, it's that curve. What do you feel now versus what is our trajectory? And I think as an overall level, we're doing okay. And, Lindsay, you mentioned some of the InsurTechs. I think those that have sustained and really found a home in the industry, I would exclude from this statement. But some of those ones that have created some of the early angst, they had zero. Let me rephrase that. They didn't put enough effort into understanding the economics of our industry and why we exist in the first place. And so we're here ultimately, every single one of us, to essentially make sure there's a financially solvent insurer at the end of the food chain when a customer has a loss. If we can't pay a claim as an industry, none of this matters anyways. whether you're a consultant, an association hubhead like me, a carrier, agent, broker, whatever it is, right? That's what we're all about. And so those that have kind of figured out, understand the economics, understand that we're ultimately here to indemnify a customer, and every single customer is a different risk. So we're not manufacturing widgets. And so once you kind of figure that stuff out, the companies that have figured out how to play in that space and support that notion, whether they're overt about it or it's just inherent in the way they're built, are the ones that are helping shape the industry.
I think that's why, people that love this industry deeply, I mean, you're one of them. We definitely share that we love this channel and respect it. It's why we get so frustrated when someone from outside sees the problem and the opportunity and thinks they're going to like ride in on a white horse, solve the issue with no perspective of exactly what's being done, and make a lot of noise, say a lot of things, and at the end of the day, they don't get it. Like they forget the purpose of what we do and why we do it. I am a proponent of we need to evolve. Like, listen, we live in an
Sure.
industry, we live in a environment. Lindsay will not accept what I would choose to accept in my world. Your son Ethan is not going to accept what we will accept. He's never going to use a fax machine. Like, that is just never going to happen, right? So my point is, there's evolution has to happen, but you have to do it with knowledge and with an understanding of what the end goal is. And it's not going to look the same in every industry, without question. But we sometimes think we're going to be just like every other industry, and it's not that way. So you got to find that line, right?
Yeah, you're right. And you use the word evolution, I mean, it's another old cliche, evolution versus revolution. And I think there's subsiding, but there's, a lot of pockets, not too many years ago where it was like it needed a nuclear sort of impetus to change. And look at what's happening in the market, right? Prices are going up, markets are firming, reinsurance costs are real issues. I mean, some of the things that are sort of deeply rooted in this concept of, we're a risk understanding and a risk transfer business, and a risk assumption business, are really coming to light right now. And they're sort of even now counter to what some of the proponents of change do, because now dollars that might have been allocated to any sort of innovation are back to underwriting profit. And so, I do think that, right, wrong, or indifferent, the technology or the capabilities or the firms that are entering in this space, or the companies that have put resource allocation to a much deeper understanding of risk, a much deeper understanding and sophistication in pricing models and risk modeling and fraud detection and cat modeling. That's not the sexy romantic stuff that's on the trade show floor at a lot of the places we go to, but that's where this industry survives. And there's some really cool stuff happening. Everybody wants to say, what's the impact of AI and robotic process automation and some of this stuff? I mean, it's there where the magic is.
So
And I
what do
think
you
that's, please, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No,
Like,
that's all right.
what do you think the impact of technology on the industry has been in the recent years, and what are kind of some specific advantages that they have had as an impact?
Yeah, I mean, again, using sort of this continuum view, I mean, maybe I'm exposing my age here, but I was a field rep in a world when carriers introduced the first time you could quote a personal lines policy online. And that's continued to go through. And so there's a big point in time there. So a lot of what's going on sort of mirrors that stage. A lot more zeros and a lot more players today. But you go back and it used to be, again, you had to get an auto quote. You had to handwrite on a Cord app or maybe type it on a typewriter and then fax it to a carrier. I mean, that's within the lifetime and career of people that are out there today. And now we're talking about doing comparative rating in commercial lines. It's a pretty cool thing, right? But today it's frustrating, right? Because not all carriers are on it. There's auxiliary questions and you still got to go into a carrier. It's still not perfect. But think about where 3 years ago, you couldn't get an online comparative rate for more than one carrier, really, in commercial lines. So those are some successful areas where I think we've moved things along. The I just completely lost my train of thought. First notice a loss. I use the claims example a lot, right? Because that's the magic of our industry. All the stuff, again, that's where the stuff comes together. And I remember on the carrier side, when you start to look at direct notice or direct reporting of claims of certain types, some agencies loved it, right? There's no value add for me. It's a very expensive process. Let the carrier handle it. Some fought it. But now it's really rare to talk to an agency that would beg to have direct, to be the one who facilitates a phone conversation for a rock chip in their windshield.
No kidding.
Right? But many fought that.
Yeah, so
And
it's a mindset shift, right? It's a total
it is.
mindset shift. So tell me, Chris, we can definitely point to things definitely for you and I, like who've been here. I've only been in the industry about 16 years. You have a much longer period of time that you've been in the industry, so you can reach back a little bit further than I can. But even the 15 years I've got, or 16 years I've got, we've seen some major shifts. What do you think some of the biggest misses are, like challenges that we're not figuring out? And I mean, carriers, listen, carriers and agents have to work together, and not every carrier is in the same space as agents. And I mean, and I do want to look at this from a technology standpoint. Like, what do you think some of the misses are and the things that um, that we have to solve for?
Yeah, miss is a negative word, but I think it's, maybe it's an appropriate misalignment for
Yeah, there
sure,
you go.
or
Better.
maybe things that have, um, with the benefit of time, we've seen that maybe they weren't the right thing. I think what we're seeing now, and um, there's some folks that you and I know that will probably give me a fist bump on this, but I think the amount of effort, and more so the amount of dollars spent on proprietary carrier portals, could have been spent thinking differently about how to connect the customer, the agent, and the carrier. And, I referenced back when personal lines comparative raters came versus now, and the ability back then, proprietary was almost a necessity because we didn't have the data transfer protocol like we do now with APIs, or even what AI and RPA is offering, and the ability to kind of let single entry feed multiple sources both directions. And so now we have those capabilities. And, we're at a spot now where people can see that I really only have to enter Carrie Wallace's address once to go quote her family with 5 carriers. Except that with a lot of carriers, I still have to go into 5 different systems and either enter it from scratch or do some cleanup stuff. And so whether that was a miss or not, you can only make a decision based on what you know at your time, and what you know at the time. And I'm a fan of document your assumptions. And if you get to a point in time, can you objectively look back and say, were my assumptions correct, or were they inaccurate? And then be willing to pivot. But I mean, from all of our experiences, once you go with that amount of dollar signs and that amount of human capital resource and strategic commitment, like it's our industry. It's hard to turn the ship quickly.
Well, it's hard to walk back from that. Like, you're already down the path. So as things, I think that's also part of this. Like, here's the deal. You make a decision with the information that you have, and it is a long-term commitment. And then the information changes. How do you pivot and change and not really think, oh goodness, now what do we do? Because there's only so many dollars to invest in these things. So it is super interesting because it's moving and shifting very fast, without question, faster than what I believe it was happening when we first started. I think that there's been an acceleration. We are in what is it? The fourth industrial revolution. There's no two ways around that, and we're in this bubble of insurance that maybe doesn't feel it the same way, but we feel it in our own lives without question. So that acceleration isn't going to slow down anytime soon. It'll be interesting to see what these massive companies do to embrace it and actually think about it, right?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. And I kind of like to, maybe I'm just hardwired to do it, but put kind of a sciencey spin on stuff. And so you think about a planet inside a solar system, inside a galaxy, right? And so there's no two ways about it that globally, the amount of change that is occurring right now is exponentially faster than when we've experienced in the past. All right. So if you step out of our industry right now, the proponents or opponents to AI all seem to align around the fact that unchecked, we could see 13 million, 14 million plus, like knowledge worker, like college educated type work going away in like 18 to 24 months. And people will say, well, that's all right. When we went through the Industrial Revolution and factories took over and automating, it kind of did the same thing. I think, which is 100% true. The difference in my mind was how quickly it happened. It took a few decades, right, for the Industrial Revolution to change things over, jobs to kind of go away, but simultaneously it created new jobs. With this pace, I think my fear is that, and a lot of people's fear is that we will displace more jobs faster than we can recreate new ones, or maybe even more specifically, we'll do that faster than we can upskill those that are displaced to do different things. And so the socioeconomic change of all of this is fascinating to think about. But all of that's happening. And then every single industry segment inside the US and the globe are all kind of reconciling through that in their own unique way for their needs. There are some industries that are incredibly ripe and prone to jump on that bandwagon and go fast. Others, I think we are one of them, for some very legitimate reasons, aren't equipped to move that quickly because of the nature of what we do. But I don't think that's an excuse to not figure out what we can learn and go a long way. Because I mean, what happens if we get exactly what we're asking for? There's a lot of people that aren't needed in the industry at all if the power of AI plays out, right? If it can really understand risk and understand what makes you unique to me and make a recommendation and write a coverage form, we have to be careful about what that means, and are we equipped to kind of respond to that as quickly as
Well, I would argue that maybe not as many people would be needed, or maybe the people that are needed will be doing different roles than what they typically had. Like, you got to rethink the actual tasks that are being done. And it could be a potential for higher market share because we've positioned ourselves to actually be able to handle more volume, more complex risk, all of those things. Like, there's also part of that. Like, you're now creating this gap of capacity that could transform our thought process about what it takes to actually protect people and be there for the claim and all of those things. And it doesn't mean they have to be the one doing the data entry. It doesn't mean they have to be the ones filling out a form 14 times in order to get comparative quotes for someone. Like, you know what I mean? So I agree with you 100%, but I also think that there is a capacity as risk becomes more complex. You need people like independent agents that understand it and know where to go and can actually move that needle in a different way, right?
Yeah, that's the thing, right? And so even inside all of this, at some level, humans still ultimately control adoption. And
100%.
not the sellers or the users, but also then the end consumer. And, I mean, I listened to some weird podcasts about this, and sometimes I listened like, what's the ultimate upside, which you started to allude to, and what's the ultimate downside? And sort of in the middle is, eventually all of us collectively will figure out where the right pace is on this. And so why is it that some of the coolest technology in the industry that's available, that actually even is economically feasible to absorb or adopt, isn't being adopted? I mean, is it pure reluctance to change? You can start to get really philosophical about, and it'd be easy to point to, one of the subsets of stakeholders in the industry as sort of at fault. But it comes back again, like, we're collectively, none of us are at fault, but collectively all of us are sort of to be indicted in this conversation. And so the consumer gets a vote.
Yeah, they definitely do. They get the biggest vote,
They
actually.
get the biggest vote. And some will choose a completely humanless automated experience at 1 a.m. and others will still want to interact with a live human being. And who knows how long that and what that kind of delta looks like over time. It's fascinating. And I think that's, back to your question about how fragmented this industry is. Like, if you're an agent out there, or if you're a carrier executive, or anybody, like, just get involved with something. Don't get stuck in your own head. It's the worst place to be. And get plugged with something, whether it's your state association, whether it's, another user group, or if you're a part of a network or an aggregator type model. Like, really embrace the power of multiple minds. With a comma, but don't allow yourself to get fully baked into a single echo chamber or a single universe of thought. It's great to find like-minded people and to kind of go run and, run together, but there's also risk of that. I think somebody that's interviewing me right now posted a thing on their LinkedIn in the last day or so about the best way to learn is to put yourself in a room with people who think differently than you.
Yeah,
And it's hard.
It is. It's super hard. Honestly, you just want to gravitate to the ones that think like you. And the moment you don't, I mean, it's what I was telling you. Like, I had no idea some of these groups that were out there and how they think and approach some of this differently. And it is so inspiring. Like, I basically came home and like, okay, I have like a million things to do because it refuels you to think differently, and it's a good thing. That's a really healthy thing to do. Yeah.
And as long as we kind of view it that way, which is maybe utopian and naive at some level, but there can be multiple groups of people trying to support an industry, even with the same stuff. And it might be overlapping and it might be some of the same people. But, it's a hard thing to do, but we might even have talked about this on one of our prior podcasts. Like, force yourself to at least start with the assumption that the other person is acting with noble intent. And I had a teacher in high school that this lesson stuck with me forever. It was an art teacher. I think, I went on to go to art school, maybe because of his influence. But he had this philosophy on the first day of class. He basically said, here's my grading position. Today, every single person in the room has an A. And the only way you don't get an A at the end of the 9 weeks is to prove to me you don't deserve one. And I fail as much as I succeed, but I try to approach every new situation and every new relationship with the same way. Like, I don't care what your baggage is. I don't care what somebody down the street said, good or bad. I don't have any experience with that. So let's assume that we're going to start today earning an A from each other. And if that works out, then it's great. But if you start with skepticism or thinking that people are in it with a hidden agenda and all that kind of stuff, then you'll never get to the most opportunistic point of view of a relationship or how the ultimate health that something can happen in, right? And so start healthy and then let it go. That's the way we're born. We're not born with disease and broken bones. I don't know. I'm getting off on a tangent, but
Well, Chris, I would
and
love
then
to
who knows?
hear I would love to hear your advice for someone like me or your son who we're new in the industry. There's all of these technology advancements happening. AI is a thing, you can utilize it, but ultimately who knows where it's going to go. Like, what advice do you have for people who are in our position?
Be a sponge, and this is something too, and this sounds like an old timer's comment. And I've talked about some of this with some folks who are of my tenure in the industry. So it sounds like the get off my lawn memes a little bit, but it's not, right? I think there's a great thing about our industry is even with 30 years in the industry, I learned something new, multiple things new every single day. So to somebody new entering the industry, like, come into it with that awareness that you will never have this solved for, never have it figured out. The people who've been doing this forever are learning. And maybe that's just like a symptom or a byproduct of how much change there is. But it's a very complex industry. And there's a lot of different things you can do. And to learn that way, network, get involved, back to the notion of there's a lot of groups of people out here that really want to help the industry. And the vast majority of the people in the industry don't even know they exist. I was at an event in Cleveland. About 150 people came. Wonderful event, very passionate people, all there with, I believe, again, assuming noble intent. They wanted to make a difference in the industry and help agents, help carriers, help other technology companies. But at break, a couple of us were talking, and we said, so here we are in Northeast Ohio, some really phenomenal agencies in that area, a couple of multiple carriers domiciled in that part of it. What percentage of the insurance professionals in Northeast Ohio even knew that these 150 people gathered in theory for their benefit? I would venture a guess it was under 5%.
I was going to say it's definitely not double digits. And I would say that's true in many things that happen. There's insurtechs in every city. Like, it's really interesting what's occurring. And I go back to, wouldn't it be amazing if that power collectively fueled something? And listen, I don't know what that is, Chris. I don't know how to make that happen because we have over 150 networks. I have absolutely no idea the number of carriers, but it's not 150. It's a whole lot more than that. We've got associations in every state. Some have two. Like we've got so many different groups. And then we've got online groups that have massive, massive following and they are not connected. They are casually some in some ways, but not interconnected in a way that we could have this amazing power. And I would love to see a day where we could figure that out because at the end of the day, there's a ton of passion about our industry. There's a ton of people who care. There's a ton of people who want to make a difference. And sometimes I think to myself, how do you be that catalyst and figure out how to be that connector? I don't know the answer to the question, but I do think it's a question worth asking, and I think it's a question worth solving. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, you start to think of the sort of the exponential amount of opportunity, but yet just frustration, right? To circle back to where we began the conversation, 40,000 agents. I mean, I think the number of independent carriers in the U.S. is somewhere between 2,500 and 3,000.
I didn't know the number. I
You
figured you'd know, but I didn't know the number. Yeah.
But just that math there creates almost an infinite number of combinations. And then to your point, the number of networks and franchisers out there, the associations, and then the independent organizations that have popped up, and just groups of people that want to get together. And on one hand, it's phenomenal, right? Because now there's all this choice for an agent that wants to get involved with other people and do exactly like we said, go meet other people, go learn from others. But so where the angst comes from. So I can see if you're an agent, you're trying to figure it out. What do I join my big I? Do I join the PIA? Do I become a member of a network? Do I subscribe to this service?
Right.
Do I hire any of the 3 to 5, leading M&A valuation companies out there? But oh my way, I have a great relationship with my banker. Like,
right. Yeah.
And then, this is the dark comment of the success is, if you're in your late 50s as an agency owner and getting told that you have to do all these things differently, and you're looking at your results and going, I'm worth 9 to 10, if not 12 to 16x EBITDA, maybe more. Even if I'm doing fine, 18 to 20 points of margin, if I'm doing really good, tell me why I have to do anything different.
It's like, hey man, I think I'm doing all right. Like this is not a situation that makes me want to change. Like I get it.
Yeah, I know. And again, people hear that and they think that like it's an excuse not to change, and it's not, right? It's not going to. But this industry has historically generated quality financial results for even marginally an average run or organizations, and so it's a blessing and a curse of all of this. And so
it is.
I don't wish I had a crystal ball.
Yeah, that I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours about this, right? There's just no two ways around that. And I appreciate you coming on and doing this. Here's the deal. We're going to evolve and we're going to change regardless, because I think there's people out there very motivated to do that. But before we close, I want to hear about your passion project. I've watched in awe as you have made your shift. You've actually published some songs, but you've written a book, which I cannot wait to actually dig into. But tell us a little bit about that, Chris, because your thought leadership is unique. And it's something I've very much appreciated as I've built my career, knowing that I could reach out to you anytime. And you definitely make me think differently. There's no two ways around that. So tell everybody that might be listening to us what this book is and what they can expect from it.
It was my total geekiness. I was reading or watching a video about Newton's laws, and I'm going through all 3 of the laws of motion, and it kind of hit me that this idea of an object at rest stays at rest unless acted upon, object in motion stays in motion unless acted upon. And so I thought about this notion of being your own inertia. And if you don't like the legacy you have, or the legacy you're building, or the legacy that you bought or inherited, do something about it. And what does that really mean? And so I started to explore this thing and build notes over the last 4 or 5 years. And who knows, I wasn't my own inertia, but it took something, I guess, to get me to going and starting to write it. But ultimately, I kind of go through and lay all this out. Some life experiences going all the way back to middle school, perhaps. where I was doing this and didn't know it, and it materially altered my life's trajectory and by default the legacy I'm leaving. And we're all leaving a legacy. That's the thing, right? You got to wrap your head around that. And so spend some time on that, but ultimately ended up with this quadranted view, if that's even a thing, where I put legacy, health of legacy on an axis, and the amount of effort in managing one's legacy, the inertia, on another, and then explore what it's like to be a business or a person in each one of those quadrants, and then a call to action. And spent a lot of time exploring the power of a gyroscope, which is the logo of my company and the book, as a metaphor for life. And so static, a gyroscope's just kind of funky looking. It's heavy, but yet you roll it off of a table and it does nothing except hurt your toe if you fall on it. But with really intentional and focused energy and a lot of effort, not only does the gyroscope become very stable, it will actually push back upon external forces, if you think about those as a kid. And so I think about that as a metaphor for life. And so if you're not focused, you're not intentional, and you're not putting energy based on what your purpose is, defining your legacy, then you're subject to any external force. But if you're really focused and put all the right energy into being what you're supposed to be, not only will you be stable, but you'll actually be able to weather external forces. And so a gyroscope is useless on the table, but it is instrumental in every airplane flight, every space flight, the Hubble Space Telescope, all the things. So that's sort of the book in like 2.5 minutes. Self-help, business help.
Yeah. So here's the thing. You have once again made it very clear why I absolutely love any conversation you and I have together, because you make people think differently, Chris. I mean, I'm not actually joking about this. Like, you throughout my career have allowed me to bounce ideas off of you and challenged me to think in a different way. And I have no doubt that your book will do that for many people. And thinking about why are we here and what can we do about it, and contemplating things about purpose, I think pushes everybody forward. So for I can't wait to read the book. I truly can't. I can't wait to see if I have things and clues in there that I know and maybe can connect to in a pretty cool way. But I'm really looking forward to it. I'm sure there will be many books after that, because you've got a lot to say, no doubt about that. But I will tell you, I really appreciate you coming and joining us today, and I hope in the future you come join us again. It's been a blast. It always is.
Well, I totally appreciate it. It means a great deal. You meant a lot to say, and I think what's great about our relationship and the folks that we would put in our inner circle is that we all do think about this stuff, and not everybody comes to the same conclusions or has the same ideas about what we should be doing different. But the genuine nature by which we have these conversations is as uplifting, as rewarding as anything is possible. And, thinking about one of the comments we made at the beginning of the show, your LinkedIn post here in the last few days about, if you want to learn and you want to grow, you got to get around people that think a little differently with you. And you can get different thought from friends, but sometimes you just got to step outside of your comfort zone and be intentional about it, get involved and be plugged in. And if I can be like one fraction of a percent of that for somebody, it's why I wake up in the morning.
Absolutely. So if someone wants to reach out to you, Chris, how can they find you? If someone wants to read your book, contemplate some of these technology topics we've talked about, just want to bounce ideas about the industry, how do they find you?
Yeah, I mean, both. So I'm on LinkedIn and a lot. I keep that open to public. I do some fun stuff on Instagram, and that's open for public as well. Don't do a lot on Twitter, but as it relates really to the technology conversation or industry stuff, that can be a personal thing. I do some of that sort of just outside of my day job, but being a part of ACT and the Big I mean, that's independentagent.com/ACT. And we have LinkedIn pages as well. And if you haven't been plugged into ACT in a while, we're trying to put a fresh face on it, trying to put more of a strategic bent to it. And to your point earlier about the number of entities out there trying to solve the same problem, we're trying to create relationships with some of them, at least, to understand what their strategic direction is, what ours might be, and where there's overlap. Like, at least we can concede that. But if we know each other exist, then maybe we can play a slightly different role and create a more complete view of suite of opportunities for agents to get involved. So check us out too. We'd love to have more agents involved, and certainly carriers and technology companies. I mean, we rely on them on one hand for funding to even exist, but it takes all three of those stakeholder groups being equitably involved for this to be a collaborative conversation. Otherwise, it's just people bantering about somebody else who's not in the room.
That's right. That's right. Well, fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Chris. I'm sure we will talk to you very, very soon.
Well, safe travels. I think we're going to see each other in the Ozarks in a couple of weeks, so I'm looking forward to it.
That's very true. I will see you there.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And very great to hang out, Lindsay. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Insurance Refocused podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please be sure to hit subscribe and leave us a review so you'll never miss us. Want to learn more about how Agency Focus can help you grow your agency? Head to agency-focus.com or email Carey directly at carey@agency-focus.com. If you need to get in touch with me, feel free to shoot me an email at lindsay@agency-focus.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week.